Okay, hello Kino students. This is part one of a series of videos on how to plan for ELA. This video is just me. I'm just one teacher out of millions. So this is the way I do it. Your other instructors will teach you how to plan in other courses, which is just as valid. I'm using the UCN lesson plan template, and because I don't teach the ELA methods course. I just wanted to take part one to just go over a few parts of it that I'm going to be referring to when I actually do my planning. So if you are very familiar with the ELA curriculum framework that is posted here in the corner, then you could probably skip this video. Okay, so everything is taken from this document, and we're specifically looking at two sections for this video. There is a lot more to go over and understand, and that's why there's a whole course on this. But what I'm looking at is planning effectively for K to 12, and then I'll go into the grade bands, but I'm only doing the grade 3 to 5 one. So the first thing that I want to point out here is using lenses to plan with. And on page 50, it'll talk about 4 different lenses that you could use when kind of framing what you're going to teach and how you're planning your unit. I just made this one bigger because this is the one I'm going to use when I plan the unit in the next video. An imaginative and literary lens. So we're using more of a literary lens for the unit I'm going to plan, which is biographies. And so we're looking at a type of genre, and we're going to be looking at certain particular authors and just the whole genre of biography. So it's focused on a writing unit, but I will draw in some social studies. I can draw in some, obviously, reading. So just putting that out there, that's what I'm going to be doing in the next video. Another thing to look at is when we're using these lenses is to focus and deepen the learning experiences. So this chart is on page 51 of that document. You can look it up, but it's going from very simple, simplistic, straightforward kind of things like in grade 9, what do I want to do with my students? I want them to read and study Shakespeare. But then we can get into a little bit more specific, and what we're trying to do is deepen their learning experiences. So changing that students read and study Shakespeare to students consider the Merchant of Venice and other sources as artifacts in order to interrogate issues related to anti-Semitism in different periods of time and from the perspectives of different cultures, values, and beliefs. So clearly you can see the difference in these. If we go back to something more simplistic, so let's say you're a grade 1 teacher, students learn about apples, and then we get all these apple books and we read about apples and we write about apples. To students explore ideas of sustainability through consideration of Canadian apple crops. So having an environmental lens. So just think about these different lenses and making sure that you are deepening the learning experience. We're going to talk more about the purpose when we get into writing our unit. There's a lot of different approaches to instructional design, and what we're doing is designing instruction. So I want to point out a few of these things that are really important. This is all from page 53 and 54, but you can do an author or genre study, which is what I will be planning as my first example. So it's going to be a genre of biography. Please go to the document to read more. And then there's other types of programming structures that you need to include. So think about how you're going to teach it. What are the best kind of ways to do it? And we want to include all of this. So the first one is workshop models. And so we're doing mini lessons, independent reading, independent writing, conferring, things like that. Centers, so having students practice their ELA during center time. Small group targeted instruction, which is why we have the centers, so that the students can practice during their center time. And then I also have time as the teacher to meet with the small groups. and setting up routines. So this is so important in the planning process, is getting those routines organized. And so I'm actually going to be adding that into my unit planning before I even start planning my unit on biographies. I'm going to be doing a routine page first because I need to see my ELA program holistically. Okay, so next I'm going to get into the grade bands. Now, again, if you are somebody who has not taken the ELA methods course, you're going to be thinking, wow, that's the whole document and Amanda's already on the grade bands. Well, I'm not doing the whole course here. I'm just doing the quick stuff I will be referring to when I'm doing my unit planning. But here we have the whole page. It's page 67 for grades 3 to 5 grade bands. There are 3 pages of this, so there's a 6 to 8 and there's a K to 2 one. I'm focusing on this one as we are middle years, but they all have the same 4 grade bands. So, 4 ELA practices. We have language as sense making, language as system, language as power and agency, language as exploration and design. And in each of those, okay, so I zoomed in over here. Language is sense making. We have questions that we're thinking. How do learners understand what they hear, read, and view? How do learners communicate to others when they write, represent, and speak? The elements that is, over here, the elements of what that means. So access, use, build, and refine schema, select from and use a variety of strategies, be aware of and articulate the ways that one engages with text. And then here's some more specific descriptors. Learners are demonstrating and understanding that texts are complex. Learners are using and talking about a variety of strategies and processes to understand and create texts. Learners are reflecting on and using what they know about texts and themselves to make purposeful and personal decisions. And you can continue reading on. What you'll see about this is that this is not a very specific or detailed outcome. And the way that our lesson plans and unit plan templates are set up for Kina now is to have a GLO and an SLO, and we do not have that in this document. So what do? I'm going to show you just a screenshot of a unit plan, or sorry, a lesson plan on a short story. So this was for grade 8, and the story was Fancy Dancer. Many of you will recognize this because we did this lesson planning in first semester in Principles of Learning and Development course. So the GLO, what I did was I put it as language as sense making. So if I go back here, that's one of the practices, language as sense making, and I just plopped it into GLO. Is it a GLO? No, but I'm making this template work for us for ELA. And then SLOs. Well, I just said there's no real SLOs. So what I did was I grabbed the grade band descriptors and I included it here. So we're doing language as sense making. Learners are using a variety of thinking processes to make sense of and respond to increasingly varied and complex texts. That is copied and pasted from the grade band page. However, it's still not specific enough for one lesson. So what I did was I added this and I put it in red italics to note to myself that I wrote this. And so I'm going to start the sentence with students will understand. So by the end of this lesson, students will, you have to have some sort of a statement like that of what your actual focus is for your lesson. So I wrote students will understand and use the reading comprehension strategy, making connections. So for this whole lesson, which I'm not showing you the whole thing, the whole purpose of this lesson was language of sense making. I want them to understand and respond to texts. Okay, that's what it says here. But how am I going to get them to understand? I mean, there's a million different ways I could do that. So I'm choosing to focus this lesson on making connections, which is a reading comprehension strategy. So the whole purpose of this one lesson is making connections. Okay, so I am making this curriculum fit into GLOs and SLOs that aren't really there. So that's kind of the trick for me. If I were to only put copy word for word from the curriculum, learners are using a variety of thinking processes to make sense of and respond to increasingly varied and complex texts. It just isn't focused enough for me to know what my purpose is in this one lesson. This SLO is not, it's not very it's not very specific. And so I can't really write a lesson plan. Like, what is my purpose? And we always have to know, like, what is the purpose? By the end of this lesson, what are they going to understand? So let's go on to the next one, language as system. Okay, and you can read all of this. I'm not going to read it to you, so please pause the video and read it yourself. And then we have language as power and agency. And the final one is language as exploration and design. And I know that I showed you in this lesson plan just one thing. Really, these I keep calling them grade bands. These 4 ELA practices do not work in isolation. They all go together. However, the entire 4 ELA practices for grades 3 to 5 is too much for one lesson plan. So I had to really key in there. In my lesson that I do reading the short story Fancy Dancer, are we not going to talk about adjectives and describing words, language as system? Are we not going to talk about identity? Sure, which is power and agency. We're going to talk about that stuff. But my main focus of that one lesson is to get them to make connections. So that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not ignoring all the others, but that's why I only have one thing there. Let's look at it in a unit plan. So this is the unit plan that you guys all have access to. This is on the trap line. I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm just going to look at the GLOs and SLOs section. So for ELA, I'm using language as exploration and design. Now this unit plan is a social studies ELA unit together. It's a book study, but it also is focused on Norway House and the Indian residential school system. So it's all encompassing if you haven't read the book. But the ELA outcomes, I'm doing language as exploration and design, and then I put some bullet points from the descriptors. So we're going to do some research. We're going to study topics. We're going to interpret information and from a lot of different sources, and we're going to integrate it into some writing activities. The top of the next page, manage information and ideas. So we're going to be using different graphic organizers and things to organize the information that we collect. Invent, take risks, and reflect to create possibilities. Well, isn't that amazing? That's something that we're going to be talking about when we share our writing with each other. And then the other one I'm focusing on is language as power and agency. And because we are talking about such an intense topic, such as Indian residential school, we need to have power and agency. So these are the 3 things that we're working on for that, that I took from that outcome. Now, this is a social studies unit, so I have all my social studies outcomes. Those are super easy that I copied and pasted there. But this is kind of how I include those into a unit plan. Is it specific enough for a lesson plan? No, that's where I get underneath. If I'm going to do a lesson plan on how to do research, I'm going to have some red, italic, or whatever color you choose, bullet points underneath of what the students will accomplish by the end of that lesson. But by the end of this unit, because it's so much bigger, I can say, yeah, we're going to look at that research and managing information holistically. We're going to be looking at power and agency, thinking about ethical issues, conflicts, moral issues, what steps they can take, what are the viewpoints, perspective, things like that. That is all in this unit. Okay. Part 2, you're going to want to come back for if you want me to actually start planning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a routine planning page for ELA in grade 3. I'm going to focus on grade 3. I think nobody's in grade 3, so that'll be good. And then completing the first 2 pages of the unit plan template for a biography writing unit. So I'm going to just do these first pages, plus I'm going to do a routine page. And hopefully this helps you with your unit planning for ELA.